Hello, everybody. It is John Pollock and Wai Ting with our All Out review, the 2023 version, our third show of 4 consecutive nights. How are you doing, Wai?
I'm doing good. That was a tremendous event.
It was a very, very good show. AEW put together an excellent pay-per-view. How did you feel going into today's show with all the news that surrounded AEW this weekend, this afternoon? How did you feel going into All Out, and what the expectations were for this show, and how much or how little CM Punk would be a cloud over tonight's event?
I mean, I thought it would be a pretty big one going in, just because how could it not be, right? Chicago, big event, every star appearing on the show. So I think the Punk news still definitely dominated maybe my mind as it related to, the topic of AEW. But coming out of it, I mean, I always knew the show was going to be good, and I almost didn't even expect it to be this good. And I would say maybe a lot of the headlines, hopefully, would be sort of like taken over by just the quality of the wrestling here.
Did tonight represent for you somewhat the next chapter of AEW? Like, how did you feel by the end of this show, maybe compared to going into it?
I think like I at least as a fan, like would look at this with a lot of optimism. I mean, not only did you have the return of Bryan Danielson in a great match, I think you had some pretty fresh directions for a lot of guys going forward. And you ended the night with a tremendous main event, with a new champion and Jon Moxley. I think elevated status for Orange Cassidy, certainly. So a lot of like interesting directions that you could take the company in that is wouldn't really kind of like make me concerned at all.
This, for me, it was very, very different from where we were after All Out last year, where it felt like this company was under this cloud because all of this was still existing. It was tonight felt as though, all right, we have removed what they perceive to be the issue, and now the company is moving forward. And it wasn't so much just the fact that the performers came out, and I think everyone knew that this was going to be a very strong show. I would say it exceeded those expectations. I was more intrigued throughout tonight by this audience, which was, it's in Chicago, it's at the United Center. And yes, we had certainly a contingent of people that, especially during the Young Bucks match where it was most prevalent. But overall, this was not an audience that was just the disciples of CM Punk that were coming here to voice their displeasure or hold this company back from having a great show. It felt as though they were as much moving on as the performers wanted to move on and put on a tremendous show. And it was one side feeding off the other for 4 or 5 hours.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly different maybe from prior instances of this sort of thing happening where, especially in the WWE when a CM Punk leaves. I mean, Punk very much, I think, became a symbol of, dissatisfied fans with the company. You're talking about a lot of AEW fans that are typically very satisfied with what's going on here. And if anything, it might be all the drama, whoever you would attribute it to, but it's the cloud of drama that probably took away a lot from the sort of just like reason why we're all here, and that's to enjoy great professional wrestling. So I got the sense like Chicago was for the most part very ready to just enjoy the wrestling, and that meant not necessarily disrespecting a lot of the hardworking talents that are still on this show.
Yeah, and it was interesting because listen, we have talked about all of these, everyone getting their references in, their zingers in, and certainly people were reading into that with Matt Jackson doing his victory lap on Collision, and whether that was a subtle nod to everything. People are going to be looking into all of this. I really hope, as a concerted effort, is that they move past that stuff and learn as though these little things, they become big things. And more so for this specific case, I think this audience wants them to move on from the CM Punk stuff, and that you don't have to get in your little dig as some little win online for your fan base. I think like there is a much larger audience that very much wants to see all of this stuff in the rearview mirror for at least the time being.
It's a big part of the reason why I was such a critic of like that best of 7 match with the Elite versus Death Triangle last time they were in Chicago after All Out. I just thought that was a bad look, especially in a situation where you weren't able to, like, your Punk was not around to be able to, counter it or to answer it. Even if it was like a one night thing for that specific crowd, all it does is refan those flames. And tonight, I don't think you saw much like sort of egregious like bringing up of like this incident to remind people, right?
Well, how did you? We're going to jump all over the place here. How did you read the Samoa Joe MJF pull apart, where here is MJF confronting Joe and being put into a standing guillotine before everyone separates the two? I mean, it's very hard to separate that from just the elephant in the room.
I would certainly suggest that there's a strong likelihood that was intentionally done as a reference, considering
And Joe being in the middle of this angle as well.
I mean, of every wrestling or every MMA move, every chokehold, everything you could do to stop an interaction, to put a guy in a guillotine, I completely felt like it was very likely intentional. And I think these things occasionally are going to pop up. Like, it's just you take what's sort of like in the discourse and you make reference to it. Now, is it the type of thing that would piss anybody off? I certainly hope not. Like, it's just taking something topical and then kind of throwing it into your fiction just as like a bit of a wink and a nod. That's all.
Well, I do feel there is a larger lesson of guys that are going out there and shooting their own angles and without company authorization. And the fact that this got to ridiculous levels of different things, and wanting that freedom for your performers, but at the same time, not to the detriment of relationships in the locker room. Like, how many issues have we seen where it has been a line has been taken the wrong way? And this is beyond just CM Punk or the Young Bucks. Like, we have seen countless instances of this, and maybe they are not just so subtle and innocent when it's causing division among your locker room, and having a clear sense that when you're on our television, you are pushing the programs that we are going towards, and you guys coming out and making reference to things that are online that we are not going in that direction, you are wasting our television time, and that is detrimental to our real estate and the programs that we are using our television as a vehicle to promote.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you'd hope that overall, like, every single performer on this roster is working towards a common goal of, lifting this entire company up and making the show overall a great cohesive product, right? And I think that probably means not doing things maybe just to kind of satisfy your own, I don't know, level of interest, perhaps. I mean, you're making reference, of course, to, Jack Perry's line, right? From
I'm not being specific to one line, because there's plenty of them that we could go into and stuff like that. But sure, you could bring that one up. It's just like, on its own, you would think like, what's the big deal? But we've seen what the big deal is when you add up all of these and the real issues that it has caused, and more or less just the fact that, like, when you are out there, you are not there to just shoot your own angles. And we have seen like call outs on live television. We have seen like all of this stuff that has just festered. And I think that is one of many lessons that can be taken from this, is just having a firmer grasp on what your promos are going to contain, and guys that are going into business for themselves, or women for that matter. That is like, it's a multi-pronged issue that it brings up, not the least of which is it's wasting our time if we are not going in that direction. The only stuff on the Punk thing we're going to talk about was Justin Barrasso at SI.com putting up an update noting the fact that the firing did not come as a shock to WBD CEO and president David Zaslav, who Sports Illustrated has learned was informed of the decision ahead of the company's press release. And also adding, this is by no means the end of Phil Brooks as CM Punk. Sources close to both sides expect a response from Punk, which holds the potential to be explosive. And I think everyone that has followed the career of CM Punk would think that he will have his version that is going to be out there, whether indirectly or directly from him himself in the near future, and the potential legal ramifications. I mean, this could be a story that if we think this was the end and we're just crossing over, I mean, if you see a lawsuit coming out of this, this could drag on for months, if not years after this on top of it. Like this, we just don't know what the next step is going to be, but I think smart money is there are steps to come after this.
Anytime there's, maybe this sort of firing with that much money at stake at the end of a deal, like
this is millions of dollars.
I think you would expect it, if there's something to fight for. It almost feels like he'd be doing a disservice by not fighting it. But the big sort of like thing none of us really know about is just how damning this footage might be, and how much of a case would Punk have in court when there's, like, just judging by maybe the way Tony kind of phrased it through those statements, it sounds, at least from him, like it's pretty clear cut, at least clear cut enough for him to be able to go on TV to say that his life was threatened. So I don't know. None of us can really say at this point.
Yeah, and that's the aspect of this all, is like, what was the incident or incidents involving CM Punk and Tony Khan, which have been, various reports on, but like that's a huge aspect to this as well. Like we focus a lot on like the Punk Jack Perry stuff, but the Punk Tony Khan stuff is, based on the statement, like that is as concerning, if not more, the fact that there's that element to it. And if you look back to the Brett Vince fallout in '97, I mean, that was part of the thought process, was that was a breach of contract, what Vince McMahon did by violating the contract. And it was sort of like Brett's side was, you could file a suit over breach of contract. You struck this man, like you assaulted him. And it's probably best that both sides just go their separate ways and we don't get into legalities, because there would have been a countersuit and Vince would have been right to sue him for assault, and neither side went the legal route. And that might be a situation here where Punk's legal representatives look at the case and with the information they have could tell him, listen, this is going to be a lot of your time and money spent, and this is not promising for you. And this is somebody that went through years of litigation. I don't know how anyone would ever want to willingly invite that kind of legal headache on their life at this point. That could be literally could be a multi-year process before there's some resolution.
Certainly. But if that doesn't happen, do we get an interview with Punk with a media outlet? I'm really curious to see, because I'm sure he desperately probably wants to get his side of the story out there, and he deserves to. So I would love to know if that ever happens.
Yeah. And for those that are listening to the podcast version, we're doing this as the press conference is happening. So we will try and relay whatever news, but bear with us. That's all coming out in real time. And you would think that there's going to be plenty of questions regarding Punk. But we're going to get into the review now from their second night at the United Center. Around 9,500 people when it comes to tickets distributed through WrestleTix, and stories that had come out on Saturday through Fightful and seemed to bleed into tonight about the potential confiscation of CM Punk signs, which to me, it's a really puzzling one, because that one just seems like a very easy idea to completely disregard if you were AEW. Like, why put yourself as the heel company that is trying to ban people that might be CM Punk supporters? I think you hit the nail on the head. Convert them with a kick-ass show. And that's what they did tonight. I mean, they had a tremendous show, and the audience, like, outside of the chants during the 8-man tag, which I didn't think they overwhelmed or hijacked that match, but like, this was a show that this could have been in any city, and it is not as though this was a army of CM Punk supporters, or even if they were not going to ruin this show in protest.
Conversely, like, when you try to censor, when you try to, maybe not give this crowd enough credit for them to be able to, I don't know, cheer for something that they truly admire versus like blindly, wanting to hijack the show or support something, that breeds negative sentiment. I should also add, so somebody who went to the arena told me that they heard a security guard tell them, that about the rumor, or at least not like it ended up being a rumor, but he said that a security guard was heard telling audiences to flip their CM Punk shirts inside out. Now, this ended up, I think other people reported that this was simply a joke. Sean Ross Sapp reported that this was only said in jest. Nonetheless, it seemed at least to be a few people were actually concerned, if not even outraged by this, but it was not something that they were doing whatsoever. The sign thing, I don't know if they were doing today, but
they were on Saturday.
They were on Saturday. Yeah.
And maybe Tony Khan will be asked about that. Like it would seem like just a poor strategy
and unnecessary, I would say.
Very unnecessary too. Like you did see, like you could see like a best in the world sign out there and stuff tonight. And it's like, so what? Like there were pro and anti CM Punk signs at the show tonight. We start off on the 0 hour with Renee Paquette and RJ City. Bryan Danielson did this great promo and said how he was at home and saw how Ricky Steamboat, who he was always a fan of, was attacked by Ricky Starks, and talked about meeting him when he was 20 years old and telling Danielson that he was incredible, and said how the last time he was in a strap match, he was in a strap match with someone he loved, in reference to Bray Wyatt when they had their Royal Rumble strap match. And we beat the shit out of each other. So what's going to happen when I don't love you, Ricky Starks? I don't even like you. The answer was they were going to beat the shit out of each other, and it would be something for the ages. That was the answer.
Mm-hmm. And they had to do, I mean, I'm sure a little bit of extra work here because they really only had 1 day to build this match. But, you know, it's the type of announcement that I think is so hot that the word spreads around really fast. Do you think that they could? Okay, so obviously they didn't know about Punk yet on Wednesday. So I guess it was still possible that he might have been on this show. What do you think?
I don't think there was a reasonable possibility. I think Tony Khan was covering himself by just stating we don't have an answer yet. But right. Once they had that footage, I think once they saw that footage, I think it was next. I don't think there was any possibility. And they were just simply covering themselves from a legal perspective and crafting that statement and making sure that when we do this, we are properly covered. I really don't think there was any shot CM Punk was doing these shows this week, even though you would have come out of the conference call with that thought that there is at least the possibility. Looking back now and seeing how this was described, and mainly Tony Khan, his specific involvement in the incident, there was no way you were putting this guy in an AEW backstage environment again.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, they chose to wait until Saturday to announce it. And yes, they did have a lot set up with TV time for Starks and Steamboat to be able to tell the story. But hey, man, I think the company kind of proves yet again that you could wait until 24 hours before to announce a big match, and plenty of people will be interested and it'll feel like a big deal.
Well, this is going to be a tremendously well-revied pay-per-view. The question will it be a tremendously purchased pay-per-view? And those are different things. There will certainly be the narrative that, everyone dogged this pay-per-view and look what it did. And listen, I don't think anyone was looking at this card and thinking, man, this is going to be a bad show. It was going to be a great show. But there's a reason why all these movie studios are looking to delay the release of all these films, because the actors cannot promote these films. You can't just put a film in the theater and say, hey, it's a great movie. People are going to show up. You need to be able to promote it and have the time and use your television. And this show, I will still maintain, as great as this show was, I don't think back-to-back weekends is your best opportunity. But I can't say that definitively until we know how this show performed, because if it ends up doing a shockingly good number, then that would be the counter argument that I would have to look at the results and change my opinion of. So I think we will see what this means. And if the Punk stuff in a weird way helped this show at all, like Danielson was a great boost at the end. Was it enough for people to buy this that were not?
And how many people were just simply curious? Like we had a little caller yesterday said, Hansi said because of all the Punk stuff, he got more interested in this just to kind of see how the crowd would react. How many people would be tuning in just for that reason? I think AEW audiences are a very unique audience from anything we've seen before, in professional wrestling. I would maybe draw even more parallels to like a Taylor Swift audience where, they could simply tweet out, "Hey, I got a movie coming out." And did you hear about the success of this like movie thing that she's doing? She's doing like a concert film
in
that's
IMAX.
releasing. Yeah, and this thing is like sold out like everywhere, and all it took was just like an Instagram post. I mean, you know, we might be talking about that level of like a diehard audience right now.
Well, the first match was the over the budget charity battle royal, where the winner would get to donate $50,000 of Tony Khan's money to a charity of their choosing. And this included the Best Friends, Dalton Castle, Sean Spears, the returning Scorpio Sky, who we have not seen since July the 8th, Jake Hager, Menard and Parker, Daniel Garcia, Action Andretti, Darius Martin, Serpentico, Commander, Brian Cage, The Gates of Agony, Aussie Open, Tony Nese, and Hangman Page. Nese did a heel promo calling the fans fat, so he was just lifted and dumped out of there pretty quickly.
The Mogul Embassy also stated that they would be donating their money if they won to the Mogul Embassy Foundation, which would be themselves.
Yeah, that would be a PayPal transfer to Prince Nana's account.
Yeah.
So Spears and Garcia did Spears was doing the 10. Garcia came back dancing, and then eventually Spears joined him in the dance before they were all thrown out. A lot of standard stuff here with the battle royal. We had a ton of eliminations. Sky ended up eliminating both Jake Hager and Daniel Garcia of the JAS before, or at least what's left of the JAS before he was sent out. And we got it down to Andretti, Hangman Page, Trent Beretta, Brian Cage, Toa, and Kyle Fletcher. And the crowd is chanting cowboy shit. So if you thought Hangman was going to be the recipient, wasn't at least in this instance. Fletcher sends out Andretti. Trent then eliminates Fletcher with a half and half on the edge, and then Cage with the F10 sending Trent over the top. He's gone. Cage does a running powerbomb that's countered by Hangman with a head scissors. He buckshots Toa to eliminate him, and then Page skins the cat, pulls Cage over, and hits the Deadeye to eliminate Brian Cage in 13 minutes and 16 seconds. And later on in the show, they announced that Hangman Page would be donating his $50,000 to the Chicago Public Education Fund. And when Nigel did mention his name, there were some boos for Hangman late when this announcement was made, but by the end it was like, okay, he's sending 50 grand back to our educational system. So you know what, that will babyface you if there was any doubt.
It makes sense considering his background as a teacher, of course, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if he actually chose it, or if it was just like a thing Tony chose and then just decided to use Hangman for it. But
knowing how they are with a lot of this, it would not surprise me if they legitimately let the performer pick a donation.
Very possible. Yeah. I think a lot of people were disappointed that Hangman didn't have a match on the show. This might have just been the next best thing. Give him, generic battle royal, and then this sort of like nice babyface spot at the end here with him choosing a local charity to give the thing to. No indication to me that like there's any sort of further storyline for Page coming off of this. Obviously they could build to it, but I think a lot of us are probably hoping for that, for him.
Well, they did state he'll have a segment on Dynamite, and we've got another pay-per-view in 4 weeks. So right. It would seem likely that he'll be in this next cycle, especially going over in this battle royal.
Just a note from the press conference, Tony Khan announced that this pay-per-view is already over 100,000 in buys.
Okay, like that. I was thinking like, if you do 110 for this show coming off of, such a big number last week, like I looked at 110 as like, your barometer if you do over that. So, I mean, if they're...
And with positive word of mouth coming off of this, what about late buys for this show?
Well, this one I could certainly see getting a lot of positive word of mouth, which AEW has benefited from. Like they're great shows that, get that kind of buzz. They do well with replay buys. But yeah, he's probably judging that based on kind of the digital buys, because the traditional buys like that's going to be, several days, I think, before they get a strong handle on it. Athena, Diamante, and Mercedes Martinez with Billy Starks in their corner. So she was not ready to go here. This had been the match that had been teased on the conference call, Athena and Billy Starks. And they were taking on Hikaru Shida, Sky Blue from Chicago, and Willow Nightingale. Mercedes did a spider suplex onto Sky Blue, and then the O-face was hit. We had Mercedes and Athena and Willow Nightingale interact, and they told the story of their big match that they had in July on the Death Before Dishonor show. And then Sheeta and Athena face off, teasing something down the road. And there's a pounce that sends Athena into the barricade. And then Athena's pulled to the floor by Sky Blue, and Sky and Willow double team Diamante, ending with a rough looking Code Blue onto Diamante. And Sky gets the hometown victory in 8 minutes and 29 seconds.
Bit of a shame about that Code Blue at the end, sort of the closing image of the match, and unfortunately didn't really look all that impactful. But nonetheless, I mean, it was really nice that she continues to really now be, I think, Chicago, like the biggest Chicago
star now.
Yeah, coming out here wearing the flag. I think a good showcase for several people in this division. I'm continuing to really enjoy these like women's trios matches this week. When you only have 1 or 2 matches on a show for the entire women's division, this really might be sort of like the best way to take advantage of that time by, giving a spotlight, especially for people like Athena that I think a lot of people this week were clamoring to see on this pay-per-view.
Jose, this was our Lucha Underground special, as they have been referred to quite often, with Jose Dralistico and Preston Vance going to meet Rush, and he had to push them to the limit to escalate their level of violence. So if you've missed these, Preston Vance and Dralistico were kidnapped and taken prisoners and basically murdered these people to break free. I think we had like several killings in this test.
I mean, I guess laws are crazy.
This was also footage that they were able to get. So maybe this was they've got their cameras everywhere, and these guys are just scot-free. Welcome to come back.
I can't explain it.
LFI is here to stay. It's their time to dominate and take the titles and take over AEW. We will see how successful they are with that goal. And then the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn with 62-year-old Dennis Rodman taking on Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, and Satnam Singh for the Trios Championships. The star of this was Sanjay Dutt. He came out in an Isaiah Thomas jersey and did like the big introduction of all the team members for Team Jarrett. This was great. And then Max came out and he rapped about how Karen is checking out the worm. They're tight like Dennis and Kim Jong-un, and he's going to beat down the 2023 oddities, which is how he's referring to Jarrett and company. So I feel with Max Caster's raps, it's sort of like if he's avoiding like the obvious subject, it almost feels like he's being manipulated or he's being censored as well. Yeah. And that's kind of where, when there is a major story that AEW does not want addressed, I think there is some like collateral damage as it pertains to Max's rap if he doesn't address it.
I mean, I don't disagree. He's kind of made a name for like, talking about what you aren't supposed to talk about. But in this instance, with the wound still this raw, I'm sure.
Oh, believe me, I was not advocating for it. It's just, it's a byproduct of the reality that I think the audience, they look at it as like, okay, he's avoiding this. So let's just bring up how the babyface has a relationship with a dictator.
Yeah.
Billy Gunn brings out Aubrey Edwards to be the referee. So Karen is furious, going back months to Aubrey Edwards' one and only AEW match. They got the advantage onto Max Caster. Karen was choking her from the floor. Karen was getting involved, tripping Bowens. And then we build up to the hot tag to Billy Gunn, who is the big gun of the team, pardon the pun. And Singh choke slams Bowens. Karen enters with a guitar and Aubrey stops her. So then Sanjay distracts Aubrey, and Aubrey physically removes Karen from the ring as Dennis Rodman has his big spot coming in. And dude, this place went nuts. When he came in, he took the guitar and he smashed it over Satnam Singh's head, which got a giant pop. Billy Gunn comes over and he's instructing Rodman to get out of the ring so Aubrey doesn't see him. Dude's like, I got all the way into this ring. I'm just going to watch the ending. And so Aubrey's got to turn around. It's a broken guitar. The dude's got the guitar in his hands, the broken guitar. And Aubrey's just got to look like the fool here. But Dennis Rodman was not exiting here. So there's a famouser to Lethal, the Arrival, mic drop, and they pin Lethal in 5:57. And then the Acclaimed and Gunn scissored with Dennis Rodman, who was he was on this show, but this got a pop. This totally got a pop when he finally came in and did his one spot.
Yeah, I would say it added something to it. Otherwise, just the trios match between the Acclaimed and Jay Lethal, Satnam Singh, and Jeff Jarrett. I don't know if it did a whole lot for me watching at home, but I think you know, occasionally doing these things for the live Chicago crowd, I think is fine, especially like given uh the potential disappointment of not having CM Punk on the show and not having a hook for Collision. Um, I I thought it was perfectly fine, harmless.
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was anything on the 0 hour that you have to go back and check out, but it was the 0 hour. So I mean, that's all it was. We open up the pay-per-view with MJF and Adam Cole defending the ROH tag titles against John Silver and Alex Reynolds, a matchup I did not think would be coming to any pay-per-view near you in 2023 or any year for that matter. But man, this was another match where, man, Cole and MJF, they have to do so little, but they get the most out of this audience. They are immediately chanting double clothesline. They're wearing their Better Than You Bebe shirts with a 23 on the back, which I hope they sold the hell out of these shirts in Chicago. This was very smart on their part. This was their Pittsburgh World Order shirt.
Yeah, I maybe a little bit more creative and a bit more effort than that, but yeah, cool.
MJF starts a sportsmanship chant because he started, Alex Reynolds had a hand in training him at the Create Pro school, so they have a history. MJF signaled for the kangaroo kick, and the place just goes electric, and then he gets hit and he starts selling his neck on the floor, and he's telling Adam, it's my neck, and Cole goes, where does it hurt? My neck. And MJF is taken to the back, so we get a prolonged period where it is 2-on-1 with Dark Order against Cole, and you've got Evil Uno as well out there who's stomping on Cole in the corner. Then he goes into the corner and gives Cole the middle finger from the apron, and the Dark Order call for their own double clothesline, but Cole kicks out. Reynolds gets the belt, and Cole boots Reynolds, super kicks Silver, and then the crowd erupts as MJF returns. He's clutching his neck. Adam Cole has no concern about his neck. He just tags the guy in. So as he's holding the neck, they're comparing this to Michael Jordan when he played with the flu, and he hits the kangaroo kick. Place goes unglued, and Cole super kicks Uno. They call for the double clothesline and pin Alex Reynolds in 14 minutes and 7 seconds. And afterwards, MJF doesn't want any assistance to the back. And as he's walking up, Samoa Joe's music plays, which they explain he's in the next match. And as he's walking down, suddenly it was Takeover Brooklyn, and he shoved the security guard, MJF, to the side, and MJF wasn't taking this anymore. And Cole tries to restrain him, but MJF runs into the ring, attacks Joe, who then proceeds to apply a guillotine to subdue the situation. And had any monitors fallen over, I think this would have been, maybe too close to whatever was being
He did have plenty of cameras on this one.
Yeah, and then security separated them. So I really like this in terms of telling you where they're going next, and did it in a kind of organic way. You had a callback, which they should reference that.
Oh, it'll be the justification for the entire story, I imagine. I mean, MJF, I'm sure he had every reason to.
He's got a 20-minute monologue about what that day meant to him and how he ruined it by becoming a meme.
If somehow like we had his time at training with Alex Reynolds and Budge, being brought up as part of the build to this Dark Order match, I guarantee you we're going to get that moment where MJF maybe, just like looking to get a little bit of backstage experience, decided to take a job as a, security guard for one night, and then to have this man shove him. Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be part of the story.
I thought they had a really good match. It was more so about the story with the neck and the big comeback from MJF late in the match. I wouldn't say this was such a great match that it just had everyone, proven wrong about Dark Order in such a coveted spot on the show. But it was a good match, and the crowd, they're super into MJF and Adam Cole. It is the hottest act in the company, and I'm amazed at just how they can get by doing just like a tiny percentage of what so many others do, and they just get these gigantic reactions, and it works.
I think it's part of the genius of this entire MJF and Adam Cole thing. Like, they are doing kind of like the silliest things and getting the biggest reactions out of it. It's a total exercise in getting the most out of doing the least. And it was the same with the Wembley match. I think this entire MJF babyface run continues to feel very much almost like a little bit of a parody of every sort of classic babyface trope, including tonight getting, him being the tag partner that leaves mid-match due to injury, only to come back for this incredible pop, coming in, doing the 10 punches and just like everything. And the crowd ate this up. So much credit goes to the layout of this match, but especially the great execution. Okay, Dark Order certainly like have not been pushed to feel like any sort of significant like pay-per-view level threat to the championship, certainly. And the other options, I guess, would have been like Aussie Open or the Hardys. I get the sense Aussie Open they're trying to save to, build to a bigger title challenge, perhaps, or a bigger rematch, I should say.
The Kingdom.
That too, yeah. But this was going to be a much better match than what the Hardys were to be able to provide. And at this point, I could see them building up to a Hardys match, but maybe for television. For an opening match, I thought this was really good. Dark Order, I thought put in great like double, sometimes triple team pressure on Adam Cole, and to be able to continue to emphasize the neck injury continues to build MJF's vulnerability as a babyface, and it's now also a weakness that you can always tie back to Adam Cole because his best friend happened to give him this awful injury that might just progressively get worse and worse throughout this run. So it might even be one of the more significant things to come out of that Wembley match.
Yeah, and I like the fact that it's sort of like the Adam Cole thing is going to simmer.
Mhm.
And with this Joe program, I think they can they have the history. You've got this move in the Muscle Buster that is just tailor-made for this guy with a bad neck in all of it. And then you've got
now
like Adam
guillotine.
Cole, and you've got now the guillotine as well. So maybe maybe MJF is going to be doing some training. All right. Samoa Joe is he goes through he takes on Shane Taylor for the ROH Television Championship, and they didn't have a whole lot of time, but on a card that has 13 matches, believe me, I was not upset at a fine 6-minute match that this one did not need much more of, to be quite honest. Like Shane Taylor, there was a story here. He had won the tournament on ROH Television, but I don't know how many I think it would be a stunning amount if we knew the amount of people that are watching AEW that are also watching ROH every week. But Shane Taylor, he's a really good talent. He's just not being seen by a lot of people. And they trade big shots early on. Joe hits a senton and Taylor kicks out at 1. And then he applies a rear naked choke. And Taylor's big spot was turning this into like a hangman's cutter off of the top rope, which looked great, and then hit a splash for a 2 count. Joe stops the strike with a huge forearm, delivers these big knees and a coquina clutch, and Taylor is out in 6 minutes and 22 seconds. If you are grooming this guy for a program with MJF, this guy, you did not need to give Taylor everything in this match or be vulnerable. This was a fine 6-minute match, and it primes Joe for a big championship program with MJF. I like the booking of this. Even if it wasn't like a big match on the show.
Agreed. I mean, after the MJF brawl, you sense that making Joe feel as strong as possible for a title challenge was going to be a priority of this match. And as a result, I wasn't really expecting much of a back and forth. And it was to the betterment of, Samoa Joe and the overall company to just have a really strong Joe match. Unfortunately, fans of Shane Taylor are probably not going to be happy because this was a pretty forgettable appearance from him. Maybe he impressed certain people, maybe he impressed certain people in the back, and hopefully it means, some sort of considerable push coming off of this, but tonight was not about him.
No, it wasn't. I was fine with the match. Like, this was a TV style match. I could certainly see like your dedicated audience that is watching ROH and sat through this tournament. And you would think like if this had been on ROH TV proper, like this would have been a big 20+ minute main event, maybe, to justify this tournament. I could see people being let down if they were following all of this and this was the end result of it. But I thought Taylor actually looked fine. If you were someone that wasn't as familiar with him, like I've enjoyed this guy for a long time, and we'll see if there's more integration, and maybe it's a lesson of your people at ROH. You should be.
Can we call those call-ups?
I don't know if that's the proper term yet. But I don't think for a lot of them, there should be this hard and fast rule about you're just ROH. Like Athena could benefit from being showcased more on a collision every now and then. And like you've already introduced all these championships, so you might as well expose them when you need it. Luchasaurus and Darby Allin with Christian and Nick Wayne in the respective corners for the TNT Championship. And Excalibur notes that Darby has stated he is in the most consistent pain that he's ever been in. So he's probably been in worse pain, but never as consistent as this pain is.
Right.
It's
chronic.
Yeah, exactly. It's chronic. And Darby gets busted open pretty early here after he's thrown into the steps. And this was our first of a lot of blood on this show. And Darby is just getting dominated when he finally places Luchasaurus in a chair and delivers a swan dive from the turnbuckle to Luchasaurus, who is seated on the chair on the floor. Then Darby had this amazing counter from the shoulders into a beautiful crucifix bomb. And Luchasaurus hits this release German, and Darby comes down on his head and neck. And Christian hands the towel to Nick Wayne, is trying to have him throw it in like he's Andre Chase. Darby comes off the shoulders, landing a tope suicida, taking out Christian, and then a code red off the top. Darby gets this amazing near fall. Crowd goes nuts for that. And then there's a Cage nails Nick Wayne with a chair and is distracting Darby because Christian is setting up for a concerto to Nick Wayne, and this gives Luchasaurus time to stop Darby, hit him with a pair of tombstones and a big lariat, dropping him on his neck, and retains the title in 12 minutes and 13 seconds. Afterwards, Luchasaurus holds Nick Wayne to watch as Christian goes to deliver a concerto to Darby, but members of the locker room, led by Sean Spears, come out to help Darby and prevent the concerto, because if this man's in the most consistent pain of his life, he does not need a concussion.
Oh, certainly not. Yeah. I thought this was a really good match. Certainly Darby Allin takes a hell of a beating. And in this one, he took a huge one. And as a result, became this lovable, completely sympathetic character throughout. It made Luchasaurus and Christian look fantastic. And I speak of those two as a single unit because in this match, you really got the sense that they are a single unit, They had, Luchasaurus, of course, being positioned as, he's Kane from 1998. Like, he's just a monster and completely just like pretty devastating and silent. And then you had Christian basically kind of
Matanza from Lucha Underground.
That too, sure. And then he's also but Christian on the outside continues to play with the mind games. I love the way that Christian was able to put pressure on Wayne to tease the towel throw, and also threatening the one-man concerto, consistently distracting Darby Allin. It put overall Darby into, I think, a very difficult and very sympathetic position that you ended up feeling, for. So overall, I thought this match set up a really wonderful comeback for him in the future.
Yeah, I thought they really positioned Luchasaurus as this destructive monster. And it's a really good act that you have with Luchasaurus and Christian at the moment. Like that's working very well, and different ways that you can go with Darby and Nick Wayne out of this.
Did this feel like a temporary write-off of Darby with the entire roster coming out to, show concern for him?
I don't know if it's a write-off. I didn't read it as that, but the
man deserves a vacation.
There's probably plenty of people on this roster that could use some time off, but no one wants time off. Everyone wants to be doing more.
Yeah.
You got to convince these guys to take a vacation. Powerhouse Hobbs and Miro. This was one of the most bizarre matches. So this, how many matches Miro has had this year?
I'm going to guess 2.
He had 3. You know how many matches he had last year?
3.
This
Wow.
year,
he was injured, right? Kind of.
He was gone for a while. He was filming stuff as well. This year, he has had 3 matches with a combined 8 minutes of ring time this year. Okay. Goodness. And he has not wrestled since July 22nd. So this, he broke plenty of records here. He did double the match time of his whole year in this one match with Hobbs. These two guys, they owe a debt of gratitude to this Chicago audience who, to me, they made this match. These two were having, they were doing their big power spots, but then the crowd just started getting into chanting, "Slap that meat," and all these variations of meat. And I would say, like, without this crowd, I thought this was a fine match, but with this crowd, this became like the match, certainly of Hobbs's career, and among the better ones with Miro as well. Like, this atmosphere was amazing for this match, and they just really got into the notion of like these two big dudes killing each other. So they're chanting meat. They're chanting meat forever. As Excalibur notes, maybe that could be a new game mode for Fight Forever. Miro hits his kick for a near fall, and the game over is applied, but Hobbs is able to break out of it, so the crowd chants holy meat. Miro then gets off the turnbuckle. He hits his own spine buster, and Hobbs kicks out of this. So once they had this crowd that were just into the chanting, and then we got into these near falls, and that just escalated things that much more. Hobbs applies his version of game over after stomping Miro in the back, and Miro escapes it, and then it's Miro hitting his own spine buster and then stomps him, game over, and Hobbs taps right as Miro's like losing his grip on it because the guy is so big at 15:38, and the crowd gets to their feet at the end of this. It was, if you watch this match on mute, I think you would have a very, like, it was just, to me, it was a match. I don't think I would have been raving about it, but man, this audience just treated this as though it was this classic match. And I was amazed by this, that how different a reaction you could have just based on the heat for it.
It was a lovely, like, very chantable type of match. And I thought the two participants in the match completely played with the crowd reaction wonderfully, whether or not this was a match kind of designed to play off of the chants, but it was entirely a match that I felt was dictated by the crowd energy and reactions.
If you had told me this afternoon, we're going to give Miro and Hobbs 16 minutes, I would have said that's risky. I would say that's very risky to put these two out there for that amount of time. But man, it worked. That was the end goal. And Hobbs offers his hand. Miro accepts it, but then Hobbs jumps him from behind, and they're all disappointed. They really wanted to see these two become like Apollo Creed and Sylvester Stallone at the end of their fight. And he chokes Miro when all of a sudden CJ Perry makes her AEW debut, the former Lana, and comes into the ring, drills Hobbs with a chair that he no-sells. So then he gets up, turns his back to Miro, and Miro attacks with the chair. And Miro is staring at CJ and just is having a conflict. He says, "You are not real." Because if you recall, he renounced his God and his hot wife. And now his hot wife is there in the flesh, and he leaves her in the ring.
So I guess we're supposed to believe in storyline that these two are broken up, and they're currently not together, or maybe she vanished somehow.
His words were, "You are not real."
Right.
So this is he didn't even believe what was in front of him.
Yeah. Okay. We'll see how they make that feel real.
This will probably be settled by All Out next year when Miro has his next match.
I think I love the fact that they're not immediately pairing these two together. They're going to give us a little bit of a story to, before they're completely reunited. I think, CJ Perry, like, coming into AEW was always a topic of discussion when Miro made his debut. And I certainly felt myself like a little bit of resistance about how well she would fit into AEW, especially considering she ended her WWE run almost like as a wrestler. And as a wrestler, she certainly has a lot to maybe, evolve into if she's going to maybe keep up with like the best of the AEW roster. But AEW also has plenty of room for people that are strictly managers, and she is a fantastic manager. She is a fantastic promo, and now as sort of like this person to tell a deeper Miro story with, I think she'd be a great fit right now.
I think she was always at her best when she was paired with Rusev, with Miro. And if she has a desire to do the wrestling side, the fact is, she is, to the best of my knowledge, off the top of my head, she has not wrestled since she left WWE, and I don't really care to watch her learn on national TV. And
she can have the occasional, she could take bumps, certainly, and I think being able to do that and having the occasional match is very valuable for a manager. But I don't know if many would see the AEW Women's Championship in her future, nor would I I don't even know if that would be her desire.
It's not her strength. It's not the strength. And she has strengths, and those should be accentuated. Kris Statlander and Ruby Soho for the TBS Championship. Kris Statlander came out, and Excalibur noted she was giving off blue steel.
Jim Ross dressed as Derek Zoolander.
And Jim Ross asked to explain what is blue steel, and Excalibur explained Zoolander to Jim Ross on the broadcast.
Oh,
so now he is up to speed on his 2001 semi-hits starring Ben Stiller. Saraya is yelling at the referee for counting too slow, and we saw a Saito suplex by Ruby Soho. She uses the gory special, and then the Sunday Night Fever gets countered with a roll-up. Saraya just loses it. This fan had a sign that read, "Saraya calls fries chips," and Saraya came over and tore this sign, which was funny, but the funnier aspect to this was the fan that took the two portions of the sign and held them up together so you could still read it after it had been torn. So this guy, he put some effort into this. She calls fries chips.
Quite the zinger. Yeah.
So there was a twisting power slam from Statlander off the second turnbuckle. Ruby comes back with a poison Rana and then a basement Rana for a near fall. Saraya distracts, and the big near fall spot was a no future off the turnbuckle, followed by destination unknown. So Ruby's two big finishers that lead to a kick out by Kris. Not the reaction you would expect for such a significant buildup for a kick out. And then Saraya distracts as Ruby gets the spray paint, when all of a sudden Toni Storm comes from underneath the ring and takes the spray paint can away from Ruby, and this leads to Sunday Night Fever and Statlander retaining in 12 minutes and 19 seconds. The finish brought it down for me. I also didn't feel like this one was one of the better matches on the show. It feels like they had structured a fine enough match together. I just didn't think it hit to the level they expected, especially for some of the near falls down the end.
I mean, I think you expected some finish involving the spray paint. I mean, in every Outcast match, the spray paint plays a part. It just depends on whether or not it works out for the Outcast. So I didn't mind it. Certainly, Toni Storm is probably the hottest act in the Outcast right now, and this gave her a bit of a role. Continues to drive that descent between the team, and gave Toni Storm a spot on the show. I liked the match. I thought Statlander has looked really awesome during this TBS title run. Her offense looks great. It looks really powerful, and I think it's really impressive to continue to see the growth in her confidence every time she's out there. Like, it wasn't that long ago when she won the championship, and she has quickly kind of like filled the role of champion really, really well. So I think she continues to be a strong part of the show. I think Soho has also been able to find herself really well now as a heel, and even in terms of in-ring style compared to like maybe how she was in the WWE, maybe even how she was when she started in AEW. She feels like a lot more complete, and her moveset is much more spectacular now. So I thought these two did really well. I wouldn't say one of the best matches on the show, but I thought it was a really good match.
The strap match between Bryan Danielson and Ricky Starks followed that, with Steamboat joining them on commentary with Excalibur and Nigel McGuinness. And Danielson comes out to Europe.
Yeah.
It was not just a one-time thing in Toronto.
That's a pay-per-view special. I like it.
The pay-per-view special. And man, this crowd, they're going nuts here, chanting yes before the match even begins. And Stark stalls, running away from getting tied up to the strap, and then attacks Danielson before the bell rings and starts whipping him with his weight belt, and uses the buckle of the weight belt to bust open Danielson, who's bleeding before the match even begins, which might have beaten any of Moxley's bleedings before, to actually bleed before the start of the match. So the match begins, and Starks chokes and whips a bloody Bryan Danielson, who, as we recall, came to AEW because he wants to bleed, and he got his wish here after months on the sidelines. Danielson would just attack him with kicks, and the whipping that these two men, I cannot imagine what the Instagram, well, I don't know how much Danielson is on Instagram, but Danielson, in the best of times, is a heavy bruiser. I cannot imagine what this dude is going to look like tomorrow, if not an hour after this match finished, because I was in pain watching some of this, and they're just brutally whipping each other's chest. Danielson wrapped the the strap around the post with Starks, and Starks starts bleeding after a post shot, and they cut to the bottom turnbuckle and it's soaked in blood. And then they zoom into Starks, who is bleeding. It was a great shot of this turnbuckle that's just like, it looked like a set of a horror film here. And then they start whipping each other in like the face, the neck and the side of the face, and with all of their might. Like these were like Major League Baseball pitchers, like throwing their biggest fastball, and over and over and over again. I mean, this would be just an absolute no-go for me. Like,
well, this would be
it would just be like, there's no way you can drop me on my head before we do this spot back and forth. This looked just, I mean, just
hey
so
man, when a man is cleared, it means he's cleared and he could do really take anything. And I guess
Danielson probably had dreams of this. I want to come back with a strap match. So, I mean, this was just unbelievable. Yeah. And Danielson is standing up to him, and he's just, oh, the best was as they're whipping each other in the necks, Ricky Steamboat, it's what we do. It's what we do. He just gets his line in there. And Danielson tells him to come on. And he whips the hell out of Starks. And then Big Bill appears. And Steamboat gets up. This is his big moment. And he chops and strikes Big Bill. And then grabs Steamboat by the throat. So Danielson throws Starks onto Bill. And Danielson hits a high cross, taking out Starks and Bill. And Ricky returns to the commentary desk and says, that big guy came in and I didn't think that was fair. And Excalibur just quietly notes, oh, Big Bill. Big Bill. I don't think Ricky knew who this guy was, but knew he had a spot here. Danielson then stomps the head in, label lock, wraps the strap around Ricky's throat and pulls back as Starks passes out at 16:39. They really put over that Starks never quit. And Steamboat comes and checks on Starks, but he leaves with Danielson. This is, I can't say I've watched every strap match and there were, in territories and such. I feel pretty confident this is probably the best strap match, at least I have ever seen.
We should also note from Bryan's promo earlier, he made reference to his last strap match being against somebody he loved. And of course that was Bray Wyatt, the Fiend. Did you mention that? I'm so sorry.
I don't know. I'm easily ignorable.
I have a lot going on.
He did bring it up. Yes, I know.
I got a lot of things to control behind the scenes, so I apologize.
And that was a very good match too. And that was without fans too, and it was a very good match that they had.
Yeah. This match was absolutely great. I would consider maybe this to be one of the first great matches on this particular show, and I say one of them because I think you had several candidates.
Oh, dude, the run that we're about to go on was incredible. But this was my match of the night. Which was a high compliment for this show for me.
One of several candidates, and when a match is already this good and you have other choices, it tells you the overall quality of the show. But this was fantastic, and especially considering the circumstance of this being a last minute choice. Danielson coming back so quickly from the broken arm, that makes this entire thing even more impressive. It had incredible intensity from beginning to end. Every one of those whips looked and sounded so incredibly hard, even through the screen. Some beautiful imagery that was created throughout this match. Like you mentioned, John, some great looking camera shots, especially with the use of blood and people getting choked out. And a lot of great heroic moments, I thought, built around Bryan, who, it feels like this win was done very much to potentially usher him as maybe one of the new faces on your product, of course, and maybe a new face of Collision even, because he was certainly a baby face tonight, despite his inclusion in the Blackpool Combat Club. Felt very much like somebody with a win like this that you could propel into being the face of an entire show.
I think this was a career-making match for Ricky Starks on top of it. I really hope, like, we talked about his program with MJF last year, and then he kind of fizzled, and I don't think got as much out of the Jericho program, but this is the latest. And that's sort of been the story with Ricky Starks. He gets hot, but then it cools down. This to me is a real breakout moment for him. And I hope that this is heavily capitalized on, because at the end of this, I mean, this honestly, this was a match of the year candidate.
So judging from the promo on Collision all the way until a performance like this, it feels very much like they might be going the babyface direction with Ricky Starks. I always felt like the heel turn coming off the Punk match felt kind of awkward because this was a crowd that already really was cheering for Ricky Starks. And other than, the reason to, of course, pair Starks with CM Punk, I saw no real reason to turn Starks back into a heel. So now that the Punk thing is no longer in play, and he's coming off a match this good, do you get a babyface turn from Ricky Starks?
It could be. I think he's a great heel, and you could go any direction. But I think there's going to be a lot of momentum for him. That if you want to turn him coming out of this, it won't be hard to do. I think that there's going to be such great praise for this match, and I don't think you can ever have enough high-level baby faces in your company. And this is one where, I mean, yes, you have MJF with the championship at the moment, but Ricky Starks could, I just feel wherever you go with him, that this should be the catalyst for that ascension to a solid position in your main event scene, because I think that's where he has ascended to in the audience's eyes. And this was a great return with Danielson, where you can go many different ways. And a big part is the fact that he should be probably in the main event of this Wrestle Dream show in his hometown, well, near his hometown, in Seattle on October 1st, which they did confirm would be a pay-per-view in 4 weeks' time. With
and Tony Khan, I believe at the presser, did say that New Japan will be lending talent. So again, what talents will that be with them also running a show on the same day? I mean,
maybe Ricky is going to go through all the dragons now, and he can go after Shingo next.
Yes, absolutely.
Then
who else?
You can get Super Dragon to come out for one more match. So
yeah, all of them.
Just go for
Red.
Yeah, there's many options. Nigel announces the donation Hangman's making, and then Eddie Kingston and Katsuyori Shibata against Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta. Taz is on commentary, and Kingston comes out with a Claudio Sucks Eggs shirt. And this was quite the weekend for Eddie Kingston. I have not seen his panel with Toshiaki Kawada, but it sounds amazing. Kawada spoke about, it sounded like this was like the same as when Kenta Kobashi came over for the Joe match, where he was thinking is anyone even going to know me here? And it was like, dude, you're going to be a legend when you come over here. And it was the same with Kawada, who apparently came over and was like, is anyone even going to show up would they even know who I am? This is someone he hasn't wrestled in 13 years. And
do you know if he's ever wrestled in North America?
The US?
Yeah.
He did excursions and such, but he he never came over, at least to this audience that would have gone to an ROH or something. He never did any of those. By the end, and he talked about this, once Misawa died, it kind of ended his passion for professional wrestling. They have, these were schoolmates together as well. And he only wrestled another year and a half after Misawa's passing, but it sounded like he was very candid, very open about his thoughts about people, and it sounded like it was an excellent panel. And
what a lovely idea to have Eddie Kingston host this interview. I mean, you won't find a bigger fan of Kawada than Eddie Kingston, and I'm definitely going to check that out. Sounds awesome.
Excalibur mentions that Kawada is here tonight, but we never saw him. And I thought that was a major fumble that they didn't have him just see it like Muto was the night before, having Kawada. He doesn't have to get involved, but just to have him showing would have been cool for this match.
Agreed. Yeah. Well, maybe he was up in the bleachers.
Yeah. He also apparently said he doesn't like people using his Northern Lights bomb. And Kingston was like, oh, maybe I'll have to make some alterations or something like that. But then Kingston said, would you ever do one more match? And he proposed the idea of Kawada teaming. I think it was Kawada teaming with Taichi against him and Sonata.
I thought it was Kawada teaming with Kingston against Sonata and Taichi.
Okay, that might have been the combination then, the two of them together. And then Kawada made the joke that if Taichi's in the match, then I won't be. So I really want to see this panel. I think it sounds amazing. So
what would have only made it better if they were eating ramen at the same time?
Maybe they went for ramen afterwards. They just had deconstructed the panel to think how they can build upon this for a few. And maybe they'll start a podcast together.
Or is it a curry shop that he has?
He has a ramen place.
Okay.
So Yuta early on, Kingston takes Claudio to the floor, and Claudio runs Eddie Kingston into the barricade, and they're working over Kingston. There's a spinning chop that drills and drops Yuta when Shibata is tagged in, his Hurricane, and ties up Yuta for a Muda lock, and then a simultaneous ankle lock is applied to Claudio. But when Claudio breaks it, he sends Shibata back, so he fully applies the Muda lock onto the knee of Yuta, so indirectly damaging Yuta's knee. Shibata hits this overhand right, dude, drilled Claudio. The idea that this guy was going to be cleared by New Japan to just do like no headshots, nothing dangerous, just like grappling stuff. He was like, doesn't work for me, brother, because this dude has zero restrictions. He is going out there for like faux MMA fights.
Yeah. He's not coming back and working like a maybe, you know, like a 90s WWE TV style. Like he's out there having matches way more brutal, I think, than most average wrestlers, for sure. Yeah.
Yuta then drops Kingston with this German, another bridging one for a 2 count, and then Claudio hits the neutralizer to Kingston for a 2 count. Rico La Bomb gets stopped, and Eddie hits the Hurricane and the Northern Lights bomb, his the band move. And Yuta breaks up the cover. Shibata applies a rear naked choke to Yuta, then sends him into an Hurricane, back to the rear naked choke, and then Eddie turns around into this brutal European uppercut, and Claudio wins with the European uppercut in 1550, which Nigel McGuinness notes he has never seen someone win with a European uppercut before.
The finish was very unique. I have no doubt it was a brutal European uppercut, but every one of Claudio's European uppercuts looks brutal. So nothing like necessarily made this one look that much more significant. And you almost wondered if it was like, was this like a like something that was not planned? I think just judging by just the reaction from the commentators and even the wrestlers, like this felt very much like an intentional finish. And I can only maybe suspect that this was, you know, perhaps a bit of a flatter reaction that they decided to sacrifice in order to maybe build the European uppercut as a legitimate finisher, something that really can come at any point in a match and can actually finish a match. So good match overall, hard hitting and intense throughout. I thought all four were really great.
Yeah, there were two ways you could have gone about this. You could have done Kingston pinning either guy. Like you could have had Yuta as like the sacrificial lamb and Kingston wins to continue chasing Claudio, or you do the surprising, like Kingston pins Claudio and sets up the ROH title match. Instead, they went this direction where it seems to be, this is the rival that Kingston cannot beat. And eventually we get this ROH title match, but that would seem like there are ways from that because he's got to work his way towards that. But that seems to be like, maybe that's the end to this program is Eddie winning that ROH title. And that could be a final battle program.
Perhaps, yeah. Although I would say at this point, like, I'm ready for Eddie to like really be firmly like placed into, you know, an AEW world title program, or at least an international title program.
I would not be leaving this guy in Ring of Honor. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Konosuke Takeshita and Kenny Omega followed that one, and electric atmosphere at the beginning of this one. And Takeshita suplexes Kenny right on his neck, and they replay this. Taz explains, you could knock someone out with a suplex. I've seen it happen. And I guess they were testing that theory here. But Kenny recovers. He hits the you can't escape on the floor using the barricade for the moonsault, and this crowd is roaring for Kenny. And Don Callis ends up placing all of these chairs onto Kenny, setting up Takeshita for a senton over the top to the floor, where they're going after the midsection where he had the hernia operation. We see a haluva kick and a blue thunder bomb by Takeshita, and the crowd starts chanting Olay as Excalibur explains the background in Takeshita's first match taking place against El Generico 11 years ago. Omega hits a Tope Con Hero, a Poison Rana for a 2 count. We see both land on their feet from Germans, and then a One-Winged Angel is countered as Takeshita hits the Bastard Driver for a 2, and then a deadlift bridging German for 2. Kenny comes back, gets him on the turnbuckle, trying for a One-Winged Angel, but Konosuke escapes, blue thunderbomb off the top turnbuckle by Takeshita, and then Callis whispers something, and as Takeshita distracts the referee, Callis goes to stab Kenny in the head with the screwdriver. Kenny moves out of the way, and he jams this screwdriver into the mat. These two must have had the utmost trust in this being pulled off with the right timing, because Don Callis was putting everything into this stabbing attempt. And so you've got the screwdriver just jammed into the mat, and Kenny then hits a ripcord knee, a V-trigger, but Takeshita grabs the screwdriver as he's lifted for the one-winged angel, but Paul Turner grabs the screwdriver away, but Takeshita still manages a victory roll counter, and then gets up, hits this knee strike for a near fall, and the crowd is super heated, and he pulls down his knee pad and drills Kenny with the exposed knee and pins him in 22 minutes and 20 seconds. And kind of a similar finish to what we just saw with Claudio, using a relatively basic move, but making it feel very significant, and with the exposed knee here for Takeshita.
Just on that note, Bryan and James in the chat are saying that Claudio has won recent matches with the singular European uppercut, so I'm guessing it's something he's been doing, maybe on a smaller scale, not on a pay-per-view. But I think it's great. You know, it continues to show that like strikes are very justifiable, like moments in a match where you could end, you know, something. So this match was also great. One of the contenders, I thought, for match of the night. If there was
awesome.
If there was any concern that Kenny would get a bad reaction in Chicago, I mean, this was a crowd that sounded so deflated when this guy lost. He was every bit, I think, you know, major like AEW babyface tonight. It was every bit of a Kenny Omega big pay-per-view performance where everything just looked so awesome, so epic. Starting off with that backdrop driver, and we've kind of had, you know, a lot of discussions about these sort of like head drops. Maybe tonight they made an excuse because they wanted to pay tribute to Kawada, watching this in the crowd. But it led to Takeshita doing some great work over Kenny's neck throughout the match, and then just some real spectacular back and forth with both men's really great looking offense. Loved the near fall they built up using the screwdriver spots, and then all the various counters, you know, based off of the one-winged angel. Just an outstanding match. And would you say continues the Callis Omega feud?
Definitely. Yeah. I think that this continues that. You've got Ospreay in the mix, you've got Takeshita in the mix, and you've still got this Jericho thing that's semi-lingering as well. If that, because whether it is Jericho teaming with Omega, like that's a direction you could go now that you could do Ospreay and Takeshita against Jericho and Omega, and that could work on a kind of New Japan themed show that you've got October 1st. Ospreay's not booked for that New Japan show. I could see that tag happening at the Seattle show. FTR and the Young Bucks against Jay White, Juice Robinson, and the Guns. So this was where the Bucks come out and they are booed pretty loudly by the audience, and they were playing it up and certainly not fighting the audience in any way.
I wouldn't necessarily say it was like a unanimous boo. Like you heard boos, and then you heard the people looking to drown out the boos, you know, by cheering the opposite direction. So in the end, it just kind of sounded like noise. But I mean, I would term it definitely a mixed reaction.
It went in waves. Like there were parts where it felt like pretty loud, but then there were also like you could see competing Young Bucks chants at certain parts. There was a period where the crowd was singing "Oh, Cry Me a River," and when Matt would tag in, or Nick, immediately they would get the loud boos. But then like later in the match, Nick comes in and he does just breathtaking sequence, like his regular sequence, and then the crowd just applauds. They're like, man, this is really great stuff as well. Yeah. So it was like they were having their fun, but it wasn't to like the detriment of the match. And I think probably all these players came in understanding probably like if the crowd's going to target one match, this is it. And it really does show you the torpedo like nature, or I should say tornado like of the news cycle, when 2 weeks ago the audience would have been like zeroed in on like Cash Wheeler being involved in a match with the Guns.
Agreed. Didn't even think of that.
And that was nothing. Like nobody even is thinking about the
that
Cash
felt
Wheeler
like 3 years ago.
Yeah, like that. Cash Wheeler was absolutely a beneficiary of this whole thing because he was just forgotten about with that whole thing, and just, you know, it was moving on to the next controversy. So all 8 have this standoff, and it leads to the baby. Well, I'll put in quotations, baby faces, applying sharpshooters simultaneously on Bullet Club Gold, and they get out of the sharpshooters. Juice catapults Dax into the post, and I'm like, oh my God, are we getting more blood here? But no blood from Dax, even with the post shot, which the announcers warned, those squared posts, they're very dangerous when you hit them with your head. So this is when Nick comes in and he gets the boos, but turns the crowd pretty quickly. And then you've got the Bucks working together with a super kick party. Cash holds Austin, and Matt almost super kicks him, and Cash grabs him. And then Matt and Cash go to deliver super kicks together. Cash's first super kick felt like it was the first super kick he's ever thrown in his life. Second one got a bit more hype, but this first one, this was a foreign move for Cash Wheeler.
No kicks, just flips.
That's it.
No flips, just fists. Yes.
Dax and Matt then work together for a spike pile driver onto Austin, but the save is made. Austin is left alone with all 4, and Dax hits the superplex, and they dub this the Power and Triple Glory, with the other 3 all taking their turns off the top, culminating with a 450 by Nick, which Juice then yanked Dax off for the cover. And Matt dives to the floor with a high cross. And then, as all this action is unfolding, maybe the most telling thing was happening in this match, and the crowd broke out in an AEW chant. And I thought that was very noteworthy. The fact that is what the crowd started to all chant together in all of this. Like it felt very symbolic. And then Dax and Nick go for the shatter machine, and then Dax and Matt together hit the BTE trigger to Jay. So we're getting the mix of partners doing the trademark spots. There's a famouser to Matt on the floor, and then the shatter machine is stopped. And in the whole interference, and this was very, everyone's timing was great for this ending, because one step off, they would have screwed this up. And it was very hard to describe. But in the interference, Jay catches Cash with the Blade Runner and gets Colton on top. 21 minutes and 40 seconds as Bullet Club Gold win. And you have Jay White pinning Dax the night prior on Collision, and then pretty much Jay being responsible for hitting the Blade Runner to Cash before Colton got the pin. And so Nick is apologizing to Cash, and they're all frustrated as they're leaving. This was a really, really good match. It had a lot of teases with different, just different near falls throughout all of it. I didn't have this as my match of the night, but nonetheless, I think this certainly warranted being considered in like this stretch of really strong matches during the second half of the show.
I agree. I thought in particular, this finish was really amazing. I think like
very good,
especially Jay White, throughout his big New Japan matches, he's really kind of made a name for himself with these very intricate, like fast paced closing sequences, just full of like really great counters. And that seemed to be a style expanded to 8 people here, where this closing stretch felt like intricate, technical, fast speed chess, where man, the crowd didn't even have time to react to some of the things that were going on. Everybody was just coming in, boom, 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 and then all of a sudden, Blade Runner 1, 2, 3. It was awesome. I love like the idea of the Bucks and FTR swapping places to complete each other's finishers. I think this team up felt very appropriate coming off of the end of their rivalry and trilogy. Bullet Club Gold, I should say, continues to just be really awesome. Juice continues to play like this really charismatic loudmouth of the group. It's a perfect role for his type of energy. And I think the Guns continue to really impress with their ability to just handle this pace and sort of like high level of action despite their relatively young careers. But the most notable thing about this match is going to be the crowd reactions, to the Bucks. And I certainly wonder what this would have felt like if they decided to delay FTR and the Bucks to this particular evening, because I think the reaction would have been a whole lot different. I sensed a lot of people in this crowd wanted somebody specific that they could boo to get out their frustrations about the CM Punk story. And, the choice was the Bucks, of course. And what of course like made it ultimately feel a little bit uneasy was that you had a match where they were teaming up with CM Punk's closest associates in FTR. So in the end, it kind of made for this really unique and interesting dynamic where you had Punk's closest associates to maybe the people that at least to the public feel like they're the most at odds with him. and it ended up being a little bit uneasy throughout. But ultimately, I think the great wrestling probably overcame a whole lot, and to kind of like maybe present, maybe even unintentionally planned, this like united front of people that are supposedly on a Punk side versus people that are the Bucks, probably was better for AEW's image overall.
Yeah, it was almost like this ceasefire by these two teams working together, and I like the fact that they didn't go for the low hanging fruit. Like it would have been very easy for Matt Jackson to do the sleeping sign or even tease a go to
like the
sleep.
trios match against the Death Triangle.
Exactly, and would it get a pop? Yes, or the negative reaction that they would have been wanting to fan the flames, and would it have been a big spot online? Yeah, but to what end? Like what is the value of that other than in the moment of, ooh, look how edgy we are? And instead they decided, let's just go out there and have a kick-ass match because we're looking forward and not looking back.
I would love to know how they might have like booked this match if it was FTR versus the Bucks straight up. Like, do you think they would have gone there?
I think you would have had the same outcome where FTR wins. It's almost like pacifying, but I again, if it was under these circumstances and the match was booked for this week, I would not be incorporating CM Punk spots. Like we are not promoting him anymore. There's no money to be made off of CM Punk. So why are we going to spend time just getting our little wink and a nod on television? Like I don't know. I'm really past that stuff. And there's a real argument of it just being way too much damage that comes out of just these silly thing, but it's stuff the Bucks really did hang their hat on for all those years, was always being like, working in the cute lines and the inside references, but
they're too close to the situation in this instance, in my opinion. What do you think of Bullet Club Gold? Like, what do you think is the match coming out of this? FTR versus which iteration of Bullet Club Gold?
I think for sure it's like, in a way, you could certainly do defenses against both teams now. Like you have like White and Juice.
Colton took the pin.
It was Colton getting the pin tonight. So you could easily get one on television with the Guns, and maybe you do like Jay White and Juice Robinson challenging FTR at the Seattle show.
Or they could face the Bucks.
They could face the Bucks. Like you definitely, and now that you have the Bucks that can do Collision, it opens it up that much more of like the available talent you have for both shows. So for Dynamite, all they have announced is Jericho and Guevara against Aussie Open, and Hangman Page will speak on Wednesday night. And that takes us to the main event between Orange Cassidy and Jon Moxley for the International Championship. And the BCC are walking with Moxley in the back, including Bryan Danielson, who's got his head bandaged up. And I mean, this was the whole reindoctrination of Bryan Danielson with the BCC with this return on Saturday and tonight.
Yeah, he never left, it's just
never left, but they were doing all the separate segments and stuff. Like he was not as involved in a lot of the segments at that point. And you've got Danielson sort of in this babyface role at this point as well.
Yeah. And you know what? Like maybe that we're perfectly fine to kind of accept that, like who's to say like a group has to be definitively like heel or baby faces. There are like MMA camps that train fighters that audiences love and train fighters that audiences happen to hate. Just because you come from the same training system doesn't necessarily mean that people you all have to have people react the same to you. So I think like that level of sophistication can work, but of course there's perfect potential for an eventual breakup for that story to be told at any point.
It started off with Cassidy going to put his hands in his pockets and Moxley just attacks him. It was a great start to this match, and he suplexes Cassidy on his injured neck and rams him into that square post, and Orange Cassidy breaks an artery here and just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds.
This was a main event level blade job.
This was your main event level blade job, and it wasn't Moxley that was the one giving up the plasma. He is biting at the wound and continues in the ring, and then Cassidy, after getting dominated here, comes back with a satellite DDT. Moxley goes back to jabs, and there's a PK and orange punch by Orange Cassidy, and they bring up the hand injury. It's not going to be the same effect with the injured hand. And Moxley, every opening he gets, he just shuts down Cassidy. He applies a bulldog choke, moves to a rear naked choke, then to an armbar before a label lock. And Cassidy holds up his hand, and you think he's going to tap, and the announcers are gasping, but then he gets to the rope. We go to the floor, and a pile driver through the exposed floor is countered as Cassidy hits the beach break and throws Moxley into the steps, but he breaks the count, getting back in, and absorbs 2 orange punches. And when Cassidy goes for the third, right into a cutter, perfectly timed, but he stops a Death Rider, lands the next orange punch, and then spears Moxley for a 2 count. And then as Moxley is just there, standing in front of him, Cassidy does the weak kicks, and Taz is questioning this. It's like, is this the right time? And just as he says that, the intensity picks up and he starts drilling him. I love this spot. I thought it was so great. And it was like the evolution of these kicks, and it totally worked for this spot this late in the match.
The evolution of Orange Cassidy, like this week he's gotten a way more serious on the microphone in addition to this. So this was him in desperation mode and him hitting a next level for sure.
Moxley eats these kicks and then boom, nails him with this huge lariat. Cassidy pops right up, then hits him with a second one, hits the Death Rider. Cassidy kicks out. And as Cassidy is staring down Moxley, he gives him the 2 middle fingers and takes the big high angle Death Rider. And Moxley pins him in 19 minutes and 43 seconds. Moxley leaves with the BCC as Cassidy is left in a pool of his blood in the ring. And he is the lone figure out in the ring as the show goes off the air. He gets up, the crowd is chanting, "Thank you, Orange," and he puts his arm in the air, and he lost the match. But this to me was as definitive, like the solidifying of Orange Cassidy at another level. They put this title reign over as this legendary run that Orange Cassidy had. And I really believe like there was as equal a chance of them ending the reign here as there was of Cassidy being one of the few people that gets a singles win over Moxley. Like it's a very small number of people that have got that in AEW, but they went with this direction. But at the end of this, you just feel like Orange Cassidy has ascended to another level. And that was something I enjoyed a lot about this pay-per-view, was the fact that this was a clear elevation of Orange Cassidy. It was a clear elevation of Ricky Starks, and you come out of it and you've just got even more players in this.
And both those, John, came as a result of losses. So at the same time, you're kind of elevating your veterans to be able to maybe hold the flag for the promotion, while at the same time with these spectacular matches, Takeshita included, they all come out looking incredible. So what a match. And of course, when you talk about a match like this, you have to talk about the totality of this title run and how you took what was a title that I think a lot of people were complaining about just, at a time when there were too many titles already in AEW, and somehow you turned this run into something that felt, I would say, not exactly the same, but like had sort of like flashes of like an Undertaker level streak, where this guy goes on this incredibly epic run that you just really didn't want to see end. And at this point, I would probably classify this as AEW's best title run in its short history. I thought this was the right call to have Moxley win, because you were never going to recapture a moment like this. A pay-per-view main event that came simply out of circumstance. And of course, having Jon Moxley on the other side, he's really at this point the company's top star. And you got a match this intense. And I thought Mox just did an incredible job of basically playing like a grizzly bear, mauling like a half dead deer that just refuses to die. And there's no better person to, put Cassidy against in this monster role than somebody like a Mox. The fact that Moxley holds the championship now, you can continue to justify putting the international championship in a main event role. You're lifting it. Like, you don't need the real world title anymore because you have the international title that feels like a true main event level worthy championship, especially with Moxley holding it. But this was about the evolution of Orange Cassidy. He's no longer, for a long, long time, he's been somebody way more than just a punchline, independent like gimmick. Like, he's an incredibly complete wrestler, the type of character that you can use to just convey this incredible level of sympathy and depth of emotion in a never give up attitude without saying a whole lot. It's incredible, and it's a testament to, I think, the level of performer and the level of creative that he is. So he's more than ready, I would say, for a world title run whenever they decide to execute.
So this was a fantastic show that AEW put on, and it felt as though they came out of this weekend, and it does feel like it's a new era of AEW, and ones that I feel like it's going to be divided. Like there are audiences that are upset about this decision, but there seems to be a lot of they're ready to move on and hopefully put a lot of these um counterproductive issues in the past. Not to say things are just going to be rosy going forward.
They won't be.
And
there will still be disputes.
there will still be problems, and there's in all likelihood there will be more CM Punk drama attached to this company. But at least coming out of this weekend, it felt as though they were moving forward. And
well, they had to. They had no other choice. They had their show to produce, right?
they did. But I mean, you come out of this, and this did not feel as though this is this company that has lost that it's been like, what will the company do now since they've lost this giant star?
I'll say nobody on this roster felt like they were coasting. Like it felt like everybody had a bit of a chip on their shoulder to make sure that this show overcame whatever negative headlines were associated with the brand, and everybody on this show, top to bottom, put in incredible effort.
All right. We're going to open it up. If you'd like to call in, we will be going to a couple of phone calls and then getting to your feedback as we round out our All Out review.
Yeah, we got some super chats here, and 2 from McRuber, who sends $5 and then another $5. Thank you so much for that support. He says, I did not realize I had to write the message first. Haha. Just left the show. Punk and Elite crowd very mixed throughout. No Tony, Miro, and Hobbs match of the night. Well, there you go.
Well, I could imagine people in the arena would come away with that thought, because it seemed like it was a party during that match. I would not classify it as match of the night, but I could certainly see from a crowd spectacle standpoint, it was like that audience made that match for me.
Completely. Like it felt like a WrestleMania, post WrestleMania level type of like reaction.
Yeah, it's a good reaction or a good comparison.
We go to Psycho 45, who sends a super chat to say, what a great show. Cheers for all the coverage. So thank you for that.
Thank you,
Psycho. Let's go to a phone call here from Brian. Hey, Brian.
Good evening, guys. Yeah, this was a home run show to me. I placed my order for it on the strength of Bryan Danielson being announced for it on Saturday. Definitely got my money's worth from him. Not only did his match kick ass, I thought this whole show kicked ass to varying levels. But even coming off of All In, there's shocker, no shortage of great wrestling these days, especially from this company. And Danielson Starks was my match of the night, and I had the main event right behind it. I echo all of your sentiments about the star-making matches held by a collection of guys. Orange Cassidy, by this point, is indisputable in my eyes. I've seen this guy, this wrestler, for years and years and years as Orange Cassidy, and as a specifically masked Ant before that. But I've gone from defending him to just like not even listening to people bad-mouthing him. Good Lord. And also really like Luchasaurus and Darby Allin. Omega and Takeshita was really good. 8-man tag. The atmosphere was just so loud and wild. I did not expect an MJF Samoa Joe feud to start out of this show, but yes, please, to all this for the promos alone. My biggest negative may have just been the flat ending to Statlander and Soho, but I thought they were good as well. And I kind of hope that Hobbs and Miro do eventually team up for the ultimate meat slapping showdown against probably the biggest pieces of meat on the roster, the Iron Savages.
Interesting. There's certainly magic, to be able to capture with this pairing, whether with them doing a rematch with each other or maybe even as a tag team. So, I wasn't there like a what did they call Butcher and like what was the team that they had like the trios or
Magic Meat.
Magic Meat. Okay. So you can have a lot of meat on meat violence. Anyway. So here's a question actually I wanted to ask you, maybe Brian, and maybe even the chat room. What do you think was the better show, All In or All Out? Strictly from a quality standpoint.
From a quality standpoint, well, All In was definitely the more monumental show and had a lot of great matches as well. I think this one I came out of it just thinking better match quality up and down the card, because like some of the matches on All In didn't quite agree with me. I wasn't as high on Stampede as most people, because I thought that was just like, as I said, my feedback to that. But yeah, again, like no shortage of great wrestling. But I would definitely suggest people check out All Out.
How about you, John? Do you have an answer for that?
I put this show ahead of All In.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of recency bias, but I think there
Not
was
really.
high.
The other show happened a week ago. I mean, it's
this
not
is
that
way,
far
this was
in-
more recent. I mean, a week ago, a lot has happened since. But I think, like, yeah, like I can see some people claiming that there might have been some match of the year contenders in this one, and I don't know if you might have had that for All In, at least to me watching. Thank you, Brian, for the call. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's go up next to Hansi. Hey, Hansi, what's up?
What's going on? I thought someone else was joining in for a
Yeah,
second.
sorry.
And that's all good. It's all good. It was money worth. It was well spent, man. I enjoyed the show. I'm glad I did. I just when they said they're gonna put Orange Cassidy and Moxley there, I'm like, it's probably the best bet because like I honestly would have wished if because I thought it was a big mistake to not have Moxley versus Orange Cassidy initially on Wembley because it's the international title. So, defending your international title on international ground for the biggest stage, I thought that would have been kind of dope. But I mean, it probably
It's more meaningful to be in the main event, and it wouldn't have been the main event last week.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So, yeah, 'cause the thing is, you asked what's better. I said the match quality on this show was better, but the thing is, man, Jericho and Ospreay in the main event for All In, those really were top notch to me, and I really I was so high on those matches. You know what I mean? Like I really was impressed with Jericho and Ospreay. So I mean, it's kind of tough, but I did like the matches a lot better on this show for the most part and all that kind of stuff, especially the main event and the strap match. Yeah, I think I mean, you would have had a doable match with Punk, I think, but I don't know, since I've seen them wrestle, and maybe they would have changed it up a bit in this match. But I mean, when Bryan Danielson steps in, man, that guy is like, he's just way too good, and I'm a Steamboat Mark as well. So I thought that match was awesome, and I liked Hobbs and Miro. I liked a lot more. You see, it would have meant a lot more if Hobbs' push had been more consistent. So you're anticipating this battle, but I think this match did enough good where now you're kind of like, okay, they better like ride the momentum of this because it just is what it is. But as somebody who didn't like Orange Cassidy, like I didn't hate the guy or anything like that. I just thought, okay, she's gonna be a meme wrestler, a mascot, that's fine, whatever, right? But like, I mean, I just didn't see like anything really that great. I think it was like All Out 2021 when it was a character thing that switched me on him. When his character doesn't really care much, right? But when Statlander was facing Britt for the title, all of a sudden he started getting really passionate. He started getting really angry and all that. And I'm like, yo, that's pretty effing cool, man. Because because his character never cares and he cares about his friend winning. So I thought like when that happened, I started changing my mind more about him, and I'm really glad. I was ready for the reign to be done. I wanted Swerve to win it, but I'm glad they kept it as long as they did, I guess, and because it paid off in the end. Sometimes you worry that the title reign is not going to pay off in the end of the things, whatever. But like I thought this lived up to expectation, and I'm a huge fan of main eventer guys going for other titles because I think like if you. Again, like I pointed out before, like if you can't get someone to go to the main event level, beating Moxley at this level with the international title, that will like go. You beat an ex main eventer guy, so like that elevates somebody. And before I go, I know it's quick, whatever. Christian did mention he was asked at the press conference about Edge, and he goes, "I only talk about myself." I thought that was funny. I didn't really pay attention much to it, but Christian addressing Edge was pretty hilarious. So that's a good highlight, whatever. But to answer your question, would you guys, if they're teasing Joe and MJF, right? Would you guys have Joe win the tournament and go to Grand Slam, or do you think they should wait until maybe wait that out until Full Gear or something like that? Because I'm gonna look forward to the promos, and I'm gonna look forward to seeing how MJF's character goes with, because Joe's a monster, right? So I'm curious of how that's gonna go, and I'm looking forward to the promos because I know MJF has 15 minutes on a promo for that. But anyway, thanks again, guys, and good work as always this past week. And John, I enjoyed your Terry Funk autobiography thing that you did for him, man. That was pretty cool. Peace out.
Thank you, Hansi.
Thank you.
It
was a biography, not an autobiography, but.
Yes, yeah, my Terry Funk autobiography. But if this were the roles reversed for this Inoki show, I mean, you do have the guy that did train in the LA version of the Inoki dojo against the guy who despises New Japan, but that's not the roles they're playing at the moment. But that would be such a natural for Seattle next month.
True. Yeah.
But you could still do this. Like I don't see that happening at Grand Slam. You're going to do this tournament. I see Joe being a bigger match, whether it be October 1st or even after that.
Yeah, I'm curious to know like how often they might switch between MJF title defenses, world title defenses versus ROH title defenses, because I think both of them, you know, can feel like they are like worthwhile uses of MJF.
Not if it's a Dark Order. I think like those like you need to be pairing like that is your top group, and if it's Cole and MJF, like you need your top teams. I think if you're going to put that on pay-per-view.
Right. Yeah, I think they have a lot of big shows to come, and you could slot that MJF Joe match really anywhere. I'd love to see them have like a pretty full, substantial feud, because how far are we from we're a month away from Wrestle Dream. Well, and you could tell a pretty good story even in that time, especially with the hot start that they had. So maybe it's likely at this point with the intensity that tonight was. Let's go to somebody who was actually at the show tonight, Ryan. Hey, Ryan, welcome.
Hey, what's happening, guys? Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
All right, it's my first-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you.
I thought the show was excellent tonight, and it was even better for me, I thought, because I woke up this morning. I didn't even have a ticket to the show. Like, I bought it online this morning. The market kind of dropped for this show. I just watched throughout the day the ticket prices going down. So I grabbed tickets later and was very surprised. Like, the expectations were low going in, but then walking out, one of the better shows I saw. So the crowd was fun, especially during the 8-man tag match. Like, that whole dichotomy, and John, like you pointed out, when they said when they were doing the AEW chant at the end, it just everything paid off. I thought that was a great moment.
Yeah, to me, it was one of the more kind of symbolic moments of the entire show, was that, you know, where they easily, like, to me, it was very much like this audience almost stating by the end of it, like, they too want to move on from all of this. And it's not as though like this was a crowd that wanted to overtake this match. Like, they had their fun with the Young Bucks and such. But by the end, it was like, they were here to see a great wrestling show. And if you were thinking like you were going to be tuning in to just see a disastrous post CM Punk AEW show, that was not what this fan base wanted that was in that arena.
Right. And I don't know if it came across on TV, but there were a few times, 2 or 3 that I counted, where they were trying to start CM Punk chants earlier in the night, and they were getting shut down immediately. Not very like violent or anything. And then that Crimea River chant that you mentioned was in response to a CM Punk chant getting shut down.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, you know, like get over it. Let's move on. Like, there's something else going on in the ring. So overall, great show. I love the first match, and that the MJF and Adam Cole match, and just shows that, you know, the crowd was so into it. You don't need to do like such crazy things. That like a simple tag match, old school, works. Like, before MJF was coming down the ramp, the entire arena looked to the ramp like a minute before he came, and everyone's expecting it, and they still went nuts when he came out. It was awesome.
What was your match of the show, Ryan?
That one was my favorite, the opener, the MJF Adam Cole one. But I would say probably the best match technically was Kenny Omega, you know, and losing. Like, it was unexpected. So my friend and I said the same thing. Like, it was a great match, but then him losing was just a shock, and it just kind of added to it. That being said, Kenny losing, I thought Orange Cassidy was going to be a lock at the end to win. So either way, it was all great matches.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot for the live report, Ryan. And glad you picked up a ticket. It was an excellent show to go watch.
Yeah, no, it just meant so much more. Just like not having that in the plan, and then to end up the day like that, just really fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for calling in, Ryan. Great to hear from you.
Yeah, no problem. See you later.
Thank you, Ryan. Take care. Let's go to some written feedback. And John, whenever you want to cut this off, feel free, because we do have a few pieces here.
Okay, we start off with Mark, who writes in, wow, what a show. After the last week, and especially the last 36 hours, this is exactly what the company and roster needed to deliver. What it lacked in the spectacle of last week's All In, and more than made up for in in-ring action. The crowd in Chicago brought it. It seemed like a celebration, with the dark clouds of controversy finally lifting away. This was an absolute blast. Listing off the matches he enjoyed and loved this show. Would put it next to Revolution as my favorite AEW show of the year.
Let's go up next to Cody from Maine, who says, I can't fault anyone for calling out the build or lack thereof, or the decision to run pay-per-views on back-to-back weekends at full price. Two justified criticisms. Unfortunately, pay-per-views with weak and or short builds are nothing new to major wrestling promotions. But on a positive note, nor is the idea of one of these shows over-delivering. And this show takes the cake as AEW's best example, surpassing the first Forbidden Door, which at least had novelty going for it. This show was great. Props to the crowd for hanging in there for essentially the entire event and not killing the show with punk-related chants. And props to the performers who busted their asses in ring tonight up and down the card. Are the positive reactions amplified due to the lack of expectations? Sure, but I'm not complaining. I was thoroughly entertained tonight. Thanks for the show.
Yeah, and I think those are somewhat separate things. Like, again, like I looked at this card, it looked like a very good card, and I would say even that it exceeded expectations. I think you just looked at it in terms, like I will say this morning, I was not jonesing to sit down and watch another 5 hours of wrestling tonight, even though I looked at this, I was like, this will be a very good card, but just having the show last night, and you're just coming off an AEW show last week, and how much did that filter into like audiences, that were they mentally ready to spend another $50, or just after maybe you watched Payback last night and you had the intention of, I'll spend 2 nights watching wrestling, and you watch one and you've got your fill. Like I had my fill after last night of wrestling for this weekend. Like I was good. If I had just been a consumer, I don't know if I would have been like dedicating another night of my weekend to watching wrestling. And again, we will see how this show does, but if it's already over 100, I would already take that as a positive, because this was very demanding of your audience to come back a second week. But if it does a good enough number, that does tell you about the audience and what they are.
What would be the takeaway you would get if let's say this is about over 110? Does it give you more confidence with them moving into a monthly pay-per-view schedule? Like, what would be your main takeaway from it?
I think for sure they continue this next year. I think that's,
you mean the back-to-back weeks.
The back-to-back weeks, I think they continue that because they want to do, well, we know when Wembley is next year, and the fact they want this Labor Day tradition that they're very high on doing, I think it gives them confidence that they can do it again next year. And I think certainly they're at that point now. They've said as much about expanding their pay-per-view calendar. And I think this would certainly give you confidence that that pay-per-view in 4 weeks is probably a very safe bet to do. Like, this is our base that is coming back, and they'll spend $100 over 8 nights, and it's not a problem. If we can get 110 to 115,000 buys, and it seems like much more for last weekend's card, I think that tells you like that audience you can depend on. But over time, that will somewhat erode that if we're moving to anywhere from 8 to 12 pay-per-views a year.
Let's go up next to is this me, John?
Yes. No. You just went with Cody. Jesse writes, an excellent show, though I think it's a mistake to run pay-per-views on back-to-back weekends. I expect the buys to reflect this. I often find the audio on AEW broadcast to be mixed poorly. But from what I could hear, the crowd was largely supportive of Hangman and even Omega, but mostly booed the Bucks. Did it sound the same for you guys? Yes, we went over that. That was fairly similar. Certainly, they were not all that negative towards Hangman and Omega. Do you see Danielson staying in the BCC? He seems to be a babyface now, and maybe Moxley is too, but Castagnoli isn't. And way you think this dynamic can just be fine, the way that these are, competing personalities, but they're all kind of unified through this one group.
I think that's fine, especially like with, I think, I don't know, like the maybe sort of like the semi-realistic, like I thought the BCC in its entirety would have like turned babyface after the Elite feud, and they've really kind of continued to play this like pretty separate role to pretty decent effect. To me, like Danielson coming out with the BCC did not really like feel awkward at all. Like it just felt like, okay, these are people from the same house. I like this guy, but I don't like this guy. And I think that still works, especially if like, maybe you have desires to keep Danielson on Collision while you have the rest of the BCC stay on Dynamite. I think it perfectly is fine. But again, they could tell that story when they want to of that breakup. Do you have any thoughts? Like, because Jesse asked here why maybe the Bucks might have received a more negative reaction than Kenny or Hangman,
because they're the ones mostly like, I think people see this much clearer as like over time this became more of a Punk Young Bucks central issue, and And really, I think if depending on how you want to, did you see this clip on Collision last night? Like after they went off and
No.
Matt's in the ring and he's kind of just putting his arms up doing this victory lap. And certainly people read into that as though that was like some subtle knock.
The stories out there about like the at this point it's almost like it's a he said she said of like, you know, whether or not there was a meeting, and but it does seem pretty like, I guess, agreed upon that the Bucks did not want the meeting. You know, I wonder if that might have kind of played into them.
I just think over time, like they're the ones that seem to be the most tied to the Punk issues, rightly or wrongly. I think that's how the audience views it. So I think that is seen as sort of like, and they are the ones that I think like the audience just it gravitates more towards in terms of that kind of a reaction, that they would probably seek that kind of thing.
We go to Jordan from the Bronx, who says, this is the type of show that AEW needed to move from all the controversy. Everyone seemed motivated to perform at their highest level, and we were treated to a show of the year contender. All In felt like a season finale, while All Out felt like a season premiere. Hopefully, this is the final reset show that AEW has to do, and everyone can move on from this past year's mess. I'm also glad to see the Chicago crowd didn't completely hijack the show. Punk is beloved there, but the consequences of his actions couldn't be avoided. Finally, I did find it comical that every time a CM Punk thing happened, Moxley is somehow rewarded with a title belt.
Well, I don't think one had to do with the other here, but
it didn't. It's just completely coincidental. Yeah.
Sal from California says, my favorite match of the night was Hobbs and Miro, which I never would have expected. A great Hoss fight, which we don't get too often in AEW. I hope Hobbs doesn't get lost in the shuffle after this match.
All right, we go to David from Arlington, who says, I've been a fan of CM Punk since he debuted in WWE ECW. I sought out any type of info I could when the pipe bomb happened, and that's how I found Review of Raw and The Law, and I've been a fan of you guys ever since. Everything concerning his departure in 2014 and the subsequent years really made it a dream situation whenever he actually came to AEW. Every program he had since his return was great. All that being said, he really has just been dragging down the brand since All Out of last year and his return this year. It was like I couldn't even enjoy AEW since his return because every week there was something else coming out. He deserves all the credit in the world for bringing eyes to the promotion with both of his returns, but on the same token, he deserves all the brunt of the negativity brought to the brand as well. His match with Joe last week was great, especially considering the circumstances, but still, this is a tie that I'm glad AEW has cut because the focus should always be on the show itself. All In is the greatest example of this. The company's biggest show ever, and Punk was the main topic before the show even started. CM Punk is a great pro wrestler, but still, I say good riddance. AEW is bigger than any one wrestler, and the show tonight proves this. It was great. So, not so much, more so thoughts about CM Punk rather than the show, but yeah, eloquently stated his opinion from David.
Yeah, and it reflects a lot of what I've seen. Where honestly, I feel, granted, you can find, the people that will take sides, but I see a lot of people that give him a very fair assessment. Like there's no one that is denying the value that he brought, which would just diminish your argument if you were to negate, but also holding him responsible for what I think he should be held accountable for. I think a lot of people have given this guy a very fair accounting of the situation from their vantage point.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, if he wasn't so good at his job and didn't create so many incredible moments for people, I don't think the leash would have been this long, like considering maybe some of the controversies that happened. But the big difference maker was like whatever took place in that video with Tony Khan present. I think, that probably maybe is not something we'll know specifically, but was like if that particular moment didn't happen, I don't know if he would be gone.
It's hard to say because ultimately there was going to be a breaking point, and this was one that it was just there was no denying what was inevitable, I feel. Kate has the last word here. The last week for the company has been wild. I would have bet money on them not being able to top All In, but I think I preferred this one. That's partly because you could feel the emotion of the show tonight. Like everyone knew they had to pull out all the stops and every single person stepped up. I've been hard on Phil sometimes, but I do legitimately think that his initial run had a lot of great moments. That said, there's nothing he could have added to the show that would have made it any better than it was. I guess we won't know for sure, but I'd genuinely be curious to see if this show doesn't do significantly better than usual in day after purchases. There's going to be strong word of mouth from this show as one of the best shows of the year, and one that at worst you could put side by side with All In. And quite frankly, just the string of matches from Danielson starts onward, to me, it just had more high quality matches than I would say last week. I would say the big ones for me were FTR Bucks, Jericho and Ospreay, and you could throw in MJF and Cole in the mix. They had Stadium Stampede. Like, they were both excellent shows, and we're kind of deciphering, like, if you have to rank one or the other.
They're competing against themselves.
Shows.
They're competing against themselves, John. And the totality of this conversation, maybe as negatively slanted as it was at the beginning of the week, AEW put on 2 great shows back to back. And I have to think, if you were one of the people who decided to spend money on the both of them, I don't think you would have complained about spending either one, like spending money on either one, because I thought you got quality as a result.
All right, but that's going to bring an end to our All Out review and our weekend of shows. So if you want to go back, we do have our breakdown of the whole CM Punk story from Saturday night, along with a review of Payback that you can go check out. And then we do it all.
Cino and Kate reviewing Collision last night.
That's right. They have a whole review of Collision Course and their thoughts on everything going into tonight's show. And then Monday night, we will be back with Rewind to Raw, chatting about the fallout from Payback and what is on tap. They are in Charlotte, North Carolina on Monday night. I don't believe they have announced anything yet. So we will be back Monday at 11 Eastern time on the Post YouTube channel. So I want to thank all of you for joining us live, and that is it.